Hey there, Internet. So I am live here right now with my good friend, Fifer Garbesi.
Hello.
She's a 360 VR filmmaker, and we are on the 360 Film podcast. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can also check it out on YouTube live. Yeah, so let's talk about 360 beyond video and audio.
All right.
Because you are a 360 filmmaker, but you do all these other things involving haptics and sort of like all this other crazy stuff. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So within location-based entertainment, we have this opening up of all these new opportunities beyond audiovisual. So, for example, the Subpack allows us to give people a haptic experience of low-end bass music, or not necessarily music, but low-end frequencies. And you can also set up scents, such as in the Sense6 box, and all of these things really cater to a location-based experience that people wouldn't normally have in their homes. Advanced haptics, people are still just getting the VR headsets. So the location-based experience, I believe, will always be one step ahead of the consumer experience.
Totally. Everyone wants to go and have that once-in-a-lifetime experience of seeing that VR piece with the filmmaker there. And, it's like one of these things where Fifer was just talking to my intro VR class at Academy of Art University, and she brought up this one VR piece that she saw where the people, you're like paraplegic, and the people in the scene are touching your hands, and then in the actual experience they would have people come up and touch your hands. So it's one of these things where you wouldn't be able to do that yet in an at-home experience. It would be very difficult.
That's almost merging onto sort of an immersive theater experience, where you have actors in a way who are coming and playing these virtual characters but giving you real-world haptics. And I think that was an incredibly powerful experience. Other ones that are sort of giving you more than just audiovisual, Can Next was actually full of these kind of experiences. And many of them were from students. I think some students in Geneva created this other experience where you were kind of lying inside of a musical instrument, and when a person could play the top of the musical instrument, and the better they played, the deeper into this psychedelic underworld you would go. So that's like kind of a multiplayer, experience where one person is doing playing the instrument in reality, and you can hear the instrument reverberating down through your spine as you transcend into this audiovisual world.
That sounds so trippy.
Absolutely.
So I feel like I didn't give your full background in the beginning of this. So Fifer's had a lot of 360 and VR pieces show at different film festivals, including Rain Dance, an invite-only Cannes VR festival. And also, recently you did a piece that's being shown in Italy, where it's very interactive.
That was shot in Italy.
Shot in Italy, but it's completely like an interactive, almost map-based piece. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So I was really trying to tackle the question of whether you can have an interactive documentary, what kinds of agency we want to give our viewers while still staying within the confines of ethical documentary limitations. For example, you wouldn't really want to give somebody the ability to choose their own adventure if events that you're documenting have already unfolded. So one way that I thought would be very fitting for the topic that I was covering, I was exploring an alternative society in Italy called Damanhur, and I wanted to give the viewer the ability to explore this society as well, and have everyone have their own adventure. So instead of having agency to change things that unfold different that essentially the story's reacting to. Instead, you have the ability to explore this village and unlock new parts of it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like Legend of Zelda, actually.
Totally,
it's very
yeah,
inspired by Legend of Zelda.
very much so. And you see this sort of happening over and over again in these games like Mario World, where people want an open world adventure now, and even video games where it used to be linear, level 1, level 2, level 3. They can't do that anymore because people want to go off and form their own adventure.
Yep.
I'm going to steal one of those napkins from you.
Please, please.
Yeah, I think that that's such a cool idea. And like you said, like the viewer can watch your piece back in a million different ways, or 50 different ways. I know you create a flow chart for it. Can you sort of explain a little bit more like your thinking process behind creating it?
Sure. So, my belief is that the user experience within these kind of storytelling VR applications can guide your viewer inside of their character arc.
Mm-hmm.
So just like we have a character arc in traditional storytelling, I believe that in VR storytelling we have a character arc as well. But the key difference is now your viewer is the character who should come out changed. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to think what UX lends itself to feeling, being vulnerable, allowing yourself to be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, allowing yourself to soak in this other lifestyle. What UX gives you a feeling that you are actually exploring but doesn't overcrowd you with, too many options. Mm-hmm. Never a good idea. You saw me with that menu today.
How many different options do people have in your piece to explore and
So they have 8 options that they can explore from the top. Mm-hmm. So when you get into it, you get into the Zelda map, you get 8. And then along the way you can unlock more options.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned that once you unlock all of the options, then what happens?
So you don't have to unlock all of the options. A big thing for me is that I wanted people to be able to get a sampling of what life is like from different people who live in Dominher, and then get to access the temples. So you only have to unlock 3 different experiences to go into the temples, where there are 8 different experiences in total. And mostly I just feel like I want people to talk afterward. If everyone has the same experience, they might talk a little bit, but I want people to come out and share their voyage with other people who've seen the experience, and kind of compare and contrast how these different themes fit together, because essentially the place is very mysterious. And trying to, and they've created their own culture.
And it's underground too, right?
Well, so the temples that they've created are underground, literally. And that's a trip in and of itself. They believe in spiral evolution cycles, so they're incorporating ancient deities. So the underground temples are painted with gods from all different religions and time periods. And it's really
Seems
wild.
Visually really far out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely lends itself to the 360 medium, and it would have been great to get some photogrammetry of that as well, but 3 days to shoot, so.
Totally, yeah. So let's talk about this. So you had this really rare opportunity, probably was a little expensive to get to Italy. How did you finance the project?
So most of my projects are financed through partners who are doing similar, who basically believe in a similar goal, a similar end goal. So my goal with this project was to showcase, different ways of cultural creation, and also to some extent, the eco-village movement. So I linked up with Keyframe Entertainment, who are very invested in the eco-village movement and the transformational festival scene, and in looking at culture. And they had published a book called Re-inhabiting the Village. And Re-inhabiting the Village, each chapter of the book refers to a different kind of cultural creation. So there's, or cultural expression. So there's like medicine and healing is one of them. Music is one of them. You know, there agriculture, all these different things, and taking a step back and re-looking at how we might want to address these things. So, for example, like our Western medicine system addresses things in a certain way, and there are also other ways of healing. That being said, I'm a big fan of Western medicine. So.
Something we mentioned earlier in the podcast was about this awesome device called the Sub Pack. Let's talk a little bit about this, because the way that I describe it to people is sort of like, I talk about like an N64 controller, and then you get this rumble pack feature where all of a sudden you can feel the rumbles and the vibrations of the video game. But with 360, you're feeling this rumbling coming from a backpack, and it's based on the bass. And you tell me about it.
Sure. So the first time I heard about Sub Pack was from a friend named, his artist name is Liquid Stranger, and he's a bass music artist. He's on the road a lot, playing shows all over, and he still wants to produce bass music. If you're a fan of bass music, you know that you don't hear most of your music if you're just listening to it in headphones. There's this whole subterranean level of the music. It's all this super low frequency that you feel in your body at a show, but you can't listen to over headphones. It's just not, headphones aren't going to do it. So Martin, Liquid Stranger, he said, oh, you know, well, I've solved this problem by using the Sub Pack. So I mix with the Sub Pack when I'm on the go, and I can feel these deep bass frequencies that aren't translatable onto the headphones. And then when I get to a show, that's what comes out of the speakers.
Nice.
So I have, I've mixed with the Sub Pack essentially to make sure that you're tapping into this low level frequencies as well. And you can do really cool stuff that doesn't have to do with music. If you're like in an underwater scene, you can sample subsonic frequencies and then relate those back via Sub Pack.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit about the project that sort of first inspired you to use the Sub Pack with it.
Yes. So Viva la Evolucion is my capstone project.
It's your trademark, your signature piece.
Yeah, it's my
calling card.
For right now, it's definitely a big part of what I've made, and it's also a very personal piece, which definitely I love it. So it was created with, so essentially, it's a 360 linear doc about underground dance music, underground raves in Cuba, and how these artists there have been connecting to the outside world despite the embargo through electronic music, and then the chaos that ensues when the embargo is lifted. This flood of American culture coming into Havana, no worries.
Noise from this.
I think it's the fans.
Oh.
And so, yeah, so it's about that. It's a very intimate story with Joyvan Guevara, who is a very dear friend of mine, and an amazing electronic music artist.
It seems like the perfect piece to companion with the Sub Pack, because it's all about this underground music scene that's happening in Cuba. And so, like, tell me about integrating the Sub Pack with that experience when you showed it at festivals. Did you feel like people were more like, whoa, I need to check this out, versus the standard just 360 piece?
I definitely think that it helps. I've shown it without the Sub Pack as well, but if you go to a show, like, part of being at a show is feeling the music. So I think it's sort of a invaluable tool.
Totally.
That being said, Viva has spatialized sound. And the Sub Pack, you can't really get like spatialized haptics on it because it's just on your back.
Totally. I think
So.
the Subpact worked really good on a piece that we collaborated on. And I'm not just trying to toot my own horn here, although I will toot it.
No, I think it's a good one.
We did a piece together all about these fire dancers, and we mixed it as a music video temporarily. I'm also working on doing like a longer documentary piece with this, which I still haven't. Did I send you a private link to that? But so we did a music video component to this where we weren't really sure what we were doing yet. We kind of did a bunch of different test shots with the Zcam S1 when it came out, and we were also testing around playing with the drones. We got a bunch of cool shots, and we were like, okay, there's no story here. Let's cut it together as a music video. And the track that you picked for it, you know, the guy. Can you talk a little bit on this and how that track came to, you know, come in the video and just people's expressions seeing it? Like, we just showed it to a couple of students in the class, and literally this one girl's face just went.
Yeah.
And it's like, it really adds this extra dimension with the sound. I find especially like a lot of events where I will be showing VR pieces, it's very loud or noisy. And so like having good sound that's gonna like noise cancel.
Yeah, you want noise canceling headphones
Yeah.
for sure if you're demoing. And the Subpack definitely helps. In terms of choosing the music,
Yeah.
so Dissolve, who's he's the producer of the track on the Fire Dancers piece. The track is called Rising Sun, I believe. And he is actually part of the Keyframe record label.
Ah.
So, you know, it's all part of that community.
Nice. So tell me, like, I know you spoke a lot today in class about, you know, different methods that people can use in terms of software to create interactive environments. Just some of the top ones off your head. You mentioned like Unity. It's probably the best tool for people who want to do interactivity, and especially Unity plugins you were talking about. Yeah,
so Unity and Unreal are, you know, both game engines that allow you to create interactivity within a scene. So that could be with a multitude of different assets, whether those assets are 360 assets, 3D assets. You know, either way you can increase the interactivity of your piece by throwing them into a game engine and allowing the user to, you know, have some agency.
Have you timed out your experience, like, you know, put 10 people through it and then averaged, like, what do you think the time is?
The time, it takes about 15 minutes.
15 to get through? Do you know, like, what would be, like, the longest someone could spend in there if they wanted to go and play, like, every experience in your piece? How long would it take?
Oh my gosh, if they watched every single video, which is possible, we don't time people out or force them to go to the temples. I think the average video time is 4 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. And there are 10, so be in there for 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah, wow. So I want to try that version of the experience where I just play everything.
Chill out in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would definitely have the most understanding of what this place is about. It's very nuanced. Like, each person has a different take on what Dom and Her is about, and
for you, what is it about?
For me, the piece is about how we create culture, and understanding that. So some people who go into the Dom and Her experience might be like, oh, that's weird. But I just encourage people to look at our culture and from a very objective lens. There are really weird things in our culture as well. So cultural creation is just a really tricky thing, and understanding that it is just very subjective. Like, people are just doing things, and it's additive as well. So like, you might take something. Like, for example, like these pagan holidays were taken and then transmuted into Christian holidays, and so like that evolution of culture is also very strange.
Totally, yeah. No, I've read stuff that even like Santa's like red and white derives back to like the colors of a sacred mushroom or whatever. You know, it all goes back.
Yeah, that's right.
To ancient rituals and whatnot. What I find most interesting about this piece is that I know you've partially described it as like they're a bunch of like cult environmentalists in a way, but I think once people watch it, then they're gonna empathize more with them and see them less in a Jim Jones light and more in like a, you know.
And they are in no way like.
Yeah,
Jim
but
Jones.
that's when you
Yeah.
first started telling me, because Fifer told me about this piece before she went to Italy and was like trying to find funding for it, and she was like, yeah, it's like they're a cult of environmentalists, and I was like, what, a cult with an underground temple? Like, just be careful if they're giving you Kool-Aid out there.
Well,
But it seems like it's a completely different experience from how it was almost initially imagined by me. I wouldn't even just say described by you, but like just where I went with my train of thought.
yeah, I mean, I would say like cults are bubbles of culture, right? And how isolated they are makes it different levels of acceptable from like the norm, right? And so I think in some ways VR is a cult.
Yeah, oh totally, the cult of the VR.
Probably why I like it.
Yeah, and speaking of big VR news this past week, the Oscars have given out a VR Academy Award to a piece that you actually saw at Cannes. Let's talk a little bit about this, because I think it's such big news. I've been predicting it for ages. My brother now owes me $50. I think that this is the start of it, but from what I understand, Bob, co-instructor of mine at Academy of Art, who's also on the Academy Awards and handles nominations, he mentioned that it's sort of a special once-in-a-lifetime award that they've given, almost in recognition of VR becoming a medium, not just for the Birdman director. But can you talk a little bit about this piece, because I know you've seen it?
Sure. So it's definitely a location-based piece. This is not a piece that you're going to download on your headset and have the same experience as the people
what's it
who
called,
go.
by the way? Because I'm horrible at portraying
Okay,
names.
so the piece by Iñárritu is called Carne y Arena, which means meat and sand in Spanish.
It's delicious.
It is a really graphic piece. I think we should think very carefully about, if we're producing content like this, we should think very carefully about how that directly helps the victims of
yeah, I hope that there's something, because it's one of these things where I feel like they're starting to make money off of it, like all of the tickets.
They made a couple $1 million off of it.
I did not.
It was bought. And I believe that couple $1 million went back to the brand that it was created with. So, I mean...
So none of the money is going to any of the people to help immigration.
I can't speak directly on that.
We need to look into that, but...
But that's something we see in VR. Like, we see, we've seen a huge number of refugee pieces in VR, and
especially if it becomes so successful. Like, to give you guys an idea, this piece is completely sold out at the LA Museum, where it's showing until the end of the year. So even if you want to see this, 10-minute VR piece, 6-minute VR piece, it is completely sold out. You cannot buy tickets to it, which I find kind of crazy. My opinion is that you should just like put it up on Steam and charge like a donation fee that would go toward helping immigrant situations like this. So tell me,
because it's so highly location based, having that experience on Steam would not be as powerful.
It totally wouldn't work.
And it wouldn't really translate that well. Like, the technical aspects of it are built out for this larger environment.
So describe this piece a bit more. I know you enter into a room filled with sand and you have to wear a backpack and you feel like temperature?
Yes. So essentially you're on a field, or a sandy desert that is in the border crossing, and it is, there are people who did not make it lying on the ground, and you can go and stick your head inside of them and look at their heart beating. And yeah, I mean, that's very striking. My concern with this and many other pieces that address like refugees is that we're not just like making art out of other people's suffering. Poverty porn is not cool, especially in VR, which is like, you know, supposed to be like an empathy machine. You can't just put on a headset and be like, oh, like I've been there.
Yeah.
No, you haven't. You are coming from a place of extreme privilege, and I think like, you know, using these experiences to foster some understanding is great, but have that be like couple that with a direct call to action.
Especially if it is making so much money to the point that
Yeah.
they're selling out and it's winning awards for stuff. And they could easily still, you know, donate that money. So I hope if anyone who's a producer on that film is listening, you know, you do the right thing.
Yeah.
Please. I think that it's one of these things where even, like, I'm working on a piece right now with a company, and it's all about homelessness issues, and we're very much trying to, like, find an outlet where, like, how this can be more helpful and not just like, oh, here's a day in the life of a homeless person. And even to the extent of us filming them, we're trying to have it be with somebody who, like, there's this guy who started a nonprofit called Invisible People, and he was formerly homeless. So having, like, someone like that
guide you in your journey,
be the guiding force, or get us the introduction into their lives.
100%.
It's one of these tricky paths,
a
tightrope.
lot of this is like, I would say the best ways to make a piece about something tricky, something, you know, like a social justice issue where there are people who are definitely suffering from it. I think the best way to go about it is to like really empower your subjects to the point where like they are helping guide the creation of the story. That also like can spill over. That really helps people. Like art therapy is real. Giving them some power, some agency. A lot of these people don't feel like they have very much power over their lives, and so like having this be a project that really like helps them and empowers them is what's up. And also like, I don't think anyone's. I mean, they're not to speak in absolutes, but I don't think there are too many people whose lives are solely suffering. There are many ways to incorporate like these people's joy and these people's like, you know, innovation in the face of hardship, and like focusing on that kind of thing. Like, you know, they're still moving, they're still doing their stuff.
Totally. Like I'm reading a graphic novel now. It's all about immigration and the issues with, you know, getting refugee status, and the guy in it is so positive that you just feel like, God, this guy's been through such a horrible experience, and yet he's like the nicest guy, and he loves America still, and he's just like, oh, you know, the best thing is honey buns in America, and it's like all about like American culture, and it's crazy. And on that note, you got a little bit of stuff on my shoe. This will be funny for the podcast audience. They'll have no idea what we're talking about.
At least it didn't go on the floor.
That's okay. I'm good. On that note, I think we should probably end our podcast interview, unless you want to talk about working with Nani de la Pina. Should we save that for another podcast?
I can quickly. That's mostly about like using photogrammetry builds. And then they incorporate 8i builds into that. So it's a volumetric video piece for the characters that are inside of a photogrammetric environment.
For laymen out there, basically you are filming an environment where you can walk around in it using multiple cameras to capture the environment, sort of?
No? So photogrammetry is usually one camera, and it's just getting many, many angles, and then you're recreating or rendering out all of those angles into a 3D object
that you can walk around in. Yeah.
I mean, it's just an OBJ, but it's blown up, so it's like a, you know.
Like that.
Yeah.
For the podcast audience, we're using our hands, so it's like you have no idea what you're saying. All right, so we're going to end it on that. Check out Fifer on Instagram at virtuallyfifer. Make sure to retweet this podcast and hashtag 360filmpodcast. And they can also find you on Twitter?
Yeah, it's the same handle as Instagram.
Cool. And what's your favorite? Is it Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo?
Yeah, I would say Facebook is a great place to reach out. I have a bunch of videos on the virtual rave on Facebook, and more to come.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, and have an amazing day. If you write a comment in the YouTube below here, we will write back to you. If you retweet a comment or question, we'll try and get back to you too. Yeah, have a great day, and this is the 360 Film Podcast.